Hello all, this is the course CE 416 and this is the lecture 7 in which we were studying the response of single degree of freedom system against any general dynamic loading. So in part 1 of this lecture, you have already studied one method, which is the Duhamel's integral for solving the governing equation of motion for a single degree of freedom system against any general dynamic loading. In this lecture, you will basically study another method which is called the step-by-step direct integration method, this one. And this is not one method, basically it's a family of several methods, and the one which we will be studying in this lecture is called Newmark's linear acceleration method. Newmark linear acceleration method. So why it's called linear acceleration, we will see in the slides. Linear acceleration method. So let's start. Step-by-step direct integration method can handle any general dynamic loading as we have already discussed. But more importantly, this method can handle both linear and non-linear structures. By non-linear, I mean that if the relationship between elastic restoring force and the displacement is not linear forever, like this, with a slope equal to k, if this Fs is equal to Ku doesn't hold for a structure in a certain range, then it becomes non-linear. For example, if the force is so high that the structure cannot resist, then this line may become horizontal, for example, or even go down also near the collapse of the structure. So for real structures, they only remain in linear range when the loading is small, and for high values of loading they may become non-linear. So in some important structural dynamic problems, the response of structures are in non-linear range. For example, the response of a structure subjected to a major earthquake. So in that case, maybe some columns or beams of the structure may go into a range which is called non-linear range, starting from here onwards. This is the non-linear range where Fs is equal to Ku doesn't hold. So to give you an example of non-linear structures, let's see here. For example, you have a column which is part of a structure, and it is developing the elastic restoring force proportional to this u, which is the displacement. So for the linear elastic case, Fs is equal to Ku, the relationship between Fs and u will remain linear or straight line forever. So at any point, for example, if we reverse the direction of loading, the behavior will follow the same line back, and it will come back to origin, and maybe it can go to the other direction also if the loading continues in that direction. But let's say, for example, this column is made of steel material, and that steel material have some yield capacity, some yield point. So in that real case, the relationship between Fs and u will never remain linear forever. Basically, when that yield point of the steel reach, the curve will become horizontal, which means the steel has yielded. And after yielding, at any point, if we unload or reload the structure in other direction, if we change the direction of the loading, then the line will not come back to origin here. It will not come back here, but it will have some residual deformation. So this deformation is basically a residual deformation, and upon further loading it will go to the other direction, and it may yield in that direction also. And after yielding, if we unload or change the direction of loading, it will not come back to origin also. So this is a example of what we call as an elastoplastic structure. Elastoplastic because it remained elastic for some time up till the yield point, and then it became plastic. So it's an elastoplastic column, and this whole cyclic behavior of the column is called hysteretic behavior or hysteretic response. Hysteretic response. It means the complete cyclic behavior of any structure or any component of a structure. In case of RC columns, the cyclic behavior or hysteretic response may not be elastoplastic because the behavior of concrete is in nonlinear range right from start. So the line is almost curved from start, and upon unloading at any point, let's say from here, the line will follow this kind of path here, and it will again have some residual deformation just like steel column. So this is residual, and then again it will follow this curved path and will unload and will not come back to origin. So this is the hysteretic response, which is quite complex compared to steel column, and it is governed by concrete cracking and rebar yielding. So the line is curved right from start, which means that the concrete starts cracking at a very early stage. So these kind of structures which are non-linear, the Duhamel integral is not applicable. Duhamel integral is based on the idea of superposition, which is only applicable to structures following Fs is equal to Ku. These kind of real structures may not follow Fs is equal to Ku in certain ranges of their response, and therefore we need this step-by-step direct integration method for their solution. So let's start the mathematical formulation of this method. Here we have the governing equation of motion, and it can be a nonlinear structure now. So we write it here as the inertial force plus damping force plus elastic restoring force can be linear or non-linear is equal to the applied loading. Now the inertial force is always equal to mass times the acceleration. However, the damping force, we will assume here that it may not be a linear function of velocity now. Just like Fs, which may not be a linear function of u now, the damping force also may not be a linear function of velocity. So it's a non-linear structure for damping force also. So now this can also be a curve similar to Fs and u, which can also be a curved line now like this u here. So the elastic restoring force is a non-linear function of displacement, and the damping force also can be a non-linear function of velocity. So the simple relationship that Fd is equal to Cu dot and Fs is equal to Ku may not hold in this structure. So our target is to solve this equation 1 for a structure like this, and our main unknown is u of t, u dot of t and u double dot of t. These three are our main unknowns in this equation. The applied dynamic force P of t is also general. It may not follow any trend. So this is also a general dynamic loading P of t. So this is also known or numerically defined for our case, and we have to solve for u of t, u dot of t and u double dot of t. So this is the governing equation at any time instant t. Let's write the same equation at a small time delta t later. So when the time is t plus delta t, the governing equation of motion will become this equation 2, where t will be replaced by t plus delta t. T plus delta t for all the 4 forces which are in equilibrium. So if we subtract equation 2 by equation 1, we will get this equation 3, which is called the incremental form of the governing equation. This is called the incremental form because now we have the change in inertial force, change in damping force and change in the elastic restoring force. Their sum is equal to the change in the applied dynamic loading. So this is the incremental form of governing equation. So now we have this equation where the change in inertial force is equal to the inertial force at t plus delta t minus the inertial force at time t, and that change should be equal to mass times the change in acceleration because mass is constant. So between t plus delta t and t, there will be change in acceleration which will change these two inertial forces. So their difference should be basically equal to mass times change in acceleration, because mass is constant. So for both instants t plus delta t and t, it will remain constant within that duration. But for the change in damping force, which is equal to the damping force at time t plus delta t minus the damping force at time t, that basically will be equal to the slope of the relationship between fd and u dot multiplied by the change in velocity. So for example, if we have any nonlinear function between fd and u dot, and we are talking from this point to going to this point, let's say, so which means that if we assume that the damping force will remain linear between this small interval of time, then we can multiply the slope of this line with the horizontal component to get the vertical ordinate. So for example, if this is x and this is y, then we know that slope is equal to y over x, and we can calculate y as slope into x. So y in this case is basically the change in the damping force from this point to the other point. So the change in the damping force is equal to the slope between one instance and other instance multiplied with the horizontal function, which is x, and basically that x is the change in velocity in this case. So this x is basically equal to delta u dot and y is equal to delta fd. So delta fd is equal to slope multiplied by delta u dot. So here we have seen that this is the slope of the relationship between fd and u dot, which can be nonlinear, but that slope is basically between any point t and t plus delta t. So we have assumed that between t and t plus delta t, the damping force will be linear. So it's a piecewise linear approximation for the damping force. So the overall relationship is non-linear, but the time interval delta t is so small that we have assumed that it is linear in that range. So the slope is basically the first derivative of y with respect to x. So dfd over du dot at any instant t. So it's the instantaneous slope, basically instantaneous slope multiplied by the x function, which is the change in velocity. So let's call that slope as c of t. Now it's a function of t because it's the instantaneous slope, and now it's not a constant number. For linear case, we have always assumed that the relationship between fd and u dot is linear forever with a constant slope equal to small c, which is the constant between fd and u dot. But now we have this c of t, which is not constant now, and it is the function of time now, and it is defined as the instantaneous slope at any time interval of the function between fd and u dot. Similarly, for elastic restoring force also, the change in fs here, which is the difference between elastic restoring force at t plus delta t and the time t, is equal to the instantaneous slope of the function between fs and u multiplied by the delta u. And let's call that instantaneous slope as k of t, and this is not constant again, this is a function of time now. So c of t and k of t are not constants now, they will change with time depending upon where you are on the function. So this have been explained here again, that for example at any time instant the value of fs is this one, and after some time interval delta t, if it is let's say here, so you were here on the relationship and then in the next instant you gone here. So basically if we multiply the slope of the tangent at this starting point, which is basically this one, and we have called it as k of t, if we multiply this k of t with the horizontal distance, this one which is delta u in this case, we will get this vertical distance, and that vertical distance is the delta Fs, the change in the elastic restoring force. So same is true for the damping force also. So now we have this delta Fs equal to K of T multiplied by delta U of T. So this K of T for linear systems will become constant, but for non-linear systems which will have some curved Fs and U relationship, this K of T will be the instantaneous stiffness or instantaneous slope of the relationship. And delta Fd will be, basically will be equal to C of T, which is again the instantaneous slope on the relationship between Fd and U dot, and then it will be multiplied by delta U dot of T to get the delta Fd. But for delta Fi, that will be equal to m times delta U dot dot. So this m is basically constant, this m is constant, so it will remain same for all time instants. The change in applied dynamic force delta P of T will be equal to the value of P at T plus delta T minus the value of P at time instant equal to T. So that is basically this distance delta P of T, and if you were here at time T and you gone here at T plus delta T, the vertical distance between them is the delta P of T. So now we have introduced the following two approximations. This is the first approximation and this is the second approximation. These two approximations are called the piecewise linear approximation, that we have assumed that the function remains linear between the time T plus delta T and T. So in that small interval of which is the delta T, the function remains linear. So they are equivalent to the assumption that damping and restoring force are linear within T and T plus delta T. So the overall relationship between Fd and U dot may be nonlinear. The overall relationship between Fs and U may be nonlinear. But within T and T plus delta T, we assume that the function is linear. This is called the piecewise linear approximation of structural system. So we have invoked this approximation to get these two equations. So now again going back to the equation 3, which is the incremental form of governing differential equation, we have here Fi of T plus Fd of T, delta Fi sorry, and delta Fd of T plus delta Fs of T is equal to delta P of T. This was the incremental form of equation. We can put delta Fi as m into delta U dot dot plus C of T into delta U dot, which is the delta Fd, and K of T multiplied by delta U, which is the delta Fs, and this is delta P, which is the change in applied dynamic force between time interval T and T plus delta T. So now we will introduce another assumption, and that assumption will help us in solving this equation 4. Now if you see this equation is a function of delta U dot and delta U double dot, which means that for any time instant, if we get these three values, which is change in displacement, velocity and acceleration, we can add them to the values which are at time equal to T and can get the values of these functions at time T plus delta T. So for any time instant, if we have these values, we can add them to the previous values to get the values for next time instant. So our main unknowns are these three values for this equation 4. So if we solve this equation 4 somehow, we will step by step solve the whole governing equation of motion. So here let's introduce another approximation, and that is called the linear acceleration approximation, and it says that the acceleration response varies linearly during each time increment. So if you have a time increment T and T plus delta T, within these two times, which means within delta t time, the acceleration value will vary linearly. So this line, if it represents u dot dot, then it will be linear. This is another approximation. So if we use this approximation, we can solve this equation 4 to get these values. We will see in next slides how. But this linear approximation of acceleration will give us the quadratic and cubic variations of velocity and displacement, because we will integrate this linear acceleration and we will get the velocity, and we will integrate it once again to get the displacement of the structure. So let's use this approximation, linear acceleration approximation, which says that the acceleration response varies linearly during each time increment. So if we have, for example, some time t and then t plus delta t, and let's say at time t the value of acceleration was some u dot dot of t, and after some t plus delta t the value of acceleration becomes u dot dot of t, which was the initial value, plus delta u dot dot of t. So this is the increment which happens between t and t plus delta t, and the assumption says that the variation between acceleration at time t and acceleration at time t plus delta t, that variation is linear. So this line is a straight line according to this assumption. So if it is a straight line, we can write its equation simply. The horizontal function, which is starting at t equal to 0 and it will continue up to t plus delta t, that horizontal variable, local variable is, let's say, tau. So we can write u dot dot of tau, which is the equation of this line. So at any tau, which can be between t and t plus delta t, at any tau value we can write the u dot dot of tau as the starting value of acceleration u dot dot of t plus the slope of the line, straight line, which is the linear line now, multiply by the x function, which is tau now. So basically it is saying that y is equal to mx plus c. So this is the line equation, straight line, linear line equation. So at any tau you will be able to get the acceleration value, which can be here, 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 or anywhere on this line. So this is the equation of this linear line which we have assumed for acceleration. This term is the slope, delta u dot dot of t divided by delta t. Delta u dot dot of t is this height, this one, which is the total height, divided by the total horizontal distance, which is delta t. So this total is delta t. So this is delta u dot dot of t. So this becomes the slope of the equation, and this becomes the x function tau. So this equation, which is equation 5, this comes from the linear approximation of the response. So if we have that equation, we can also convert it into the variation of velocity also by integration. How? For example, let's say this is the time t and this is the time t plus delta t, the same time interval which is equal to the width of delta t, and let's say at time t the velocity was this value, which is u dot of t, and the time t plus delta t the velocity become this one, which is u dot of t plus delta u dot, and delta u dot is this height, basically this height, and this is the increment in the velocity value. So we can write the equation of this line, and that equation will basically become the velocity at any tau, and this is again tau, starting from here, this is tau. So at any tau value, the velocity value is equal to the initial velocity, starting value, plus the integration of acceleration. This is the acceleration function being integrated from 0 to tau. So if we integrate, for example, we want to find velocity at this point. So this will become our u dot of tau. So what we can do is that we have to integrate this acceleration function at the same time instant, at the same tau value, and that integration will basically give us the increment in velocity at that instantaneous value. So the u dot of tau is equal to the u dot of t, which is the initial value, plus the increment. So this is the increment in velocity, and that increment becomes this whole delta u dot dot of t when tau becomes t plus delta t. So when tau is t plus delta t, the increment will correspond to this whole height, which will become delta u dot of t. So we can use this equation 5 and we can put it here. Equation 5 can be put here and can be integrated. So when we integrate it, we will get the variation of velocity, and that variation will be basically a second order function of tau, which means that it is a quadratic function. So let's put it here. So we have u dot of t here, and then we will put whole this equation 5 here and we will integrate. So the integration of equation 5 will become, this will become u dot dot of t into tau, because we will integrate with respect to tau, not with respect to t. So when we integrate with respect to tau, this thing will become a constant value. This u dot dot of t will become a constant thing. So that constant will be multiplied by the variable tau when we integrate it, plus the integration of this whole thing, and this again the slope is a constant thing, so slope will remain same, and then the integration of tau is tau square over 2. So which means that now this is a quadratic variation of tau. So this whole term, these two terms is basically the change in velocity. So we can write it here as the velocity at any time instant tau, which is between t and t plus delta t, is equal to the initial velocity at time t plus this delta u dot of tau. Similarly, we can also write the equation for displacement also. So displacement at any time instant tau, which is between t and t plus delta t, this tau, this is t and this is t plus delta t, that displacement is basically equal to the displacement at time t plus the integration of velocity equation, and that velocity equation we have already found out as equation 6. So the displacement will be equal to u of tau equal to u of t, which is the initial value here, starting value of displacement, plus the integration of velocity. So if we integrate equation 6, we will get this whole function, and that function is basically equal to the change in displacements. So it is delta u of tau. So we can see here that this integration of equation 6 will yield a cubic function for displacement. So it's a cubic function, cubic variation for displacement. So please note that we have invoked just one assumption. This is the linear acceleration assumption, which is equation 5. Equation 6 and equation 7 we get from equation 5, because we put the equation 5 in equation 6 integration and integrate it. Similarly, equation 6 is put in equation 7 in integration and we get that equation 7. So our only assumption was the linear acceleration assumption, this one, top one. The other two equations we get from that assumption. So now we have already got increment in the value of velocity and displacement. So now we can write these increments, these ones. So this whole circle will become basically the increment in velocity, and this whole circle, this one, will become the increment in displacement. So we can separate these two equations out here in next slide. These are the two equations, the increment in velocity and the increment in displacement. But now what we have done is at tau equal to delta t, the above equations for velocity and displacement will be these ones, in which the value of tau is replaced by delta t. So this was tau in previous slide, this was also tau in previous slide, and we have replaced them with delta t now. So now if we have time t here and t plus delta t here, so given the velocity at this point u dot of t, we now have the equation that we can predict the velocity at time t plus delta t. So this is u dot t plus delta t, and that is basically equal to the initial value plus the increment, and that increment can be written as equation 8. Same is true for displacement, that the increment in displacement between t and delta t can be written by equation 9. But in order to solve these equations 8 and equation 9, we need to know the value of delta u dot dot, this one. This is the delta u dot dot. The time increment is kind of known already. The values of velocity and acceleration at any time instant, they are also known for time t. So we can rearrange these equations 8 and 9 to get these new form of these same equations, which is equation 10 and 11. Equation 10 is the same equation, equation 9, but now we have separate out this delta u dot dot of t, which is this one. We have written it on the left hand side of this equation 10, and all of the terms we have taken to right hand side. So now we have delta u dot dot, which is now a function of delta u. So all of the terms are taken on the other side of the equation, and we will get this equation 10. And I will tell you in a moment why we are doing this. And if we put this delta u dot dot, which we have calculated in equation 10, we can put it in this equation 8 here at this point to get delta u also. So this is equation 11 is the same as equation 8 with delta u dot on the left hand side here, but the value of delta u dot dot is substituted here and then solved to get the equation 11. Now why we have written these two equations 10 and 11 in this form, you can see here that now the change in acceleration and change in velocity both can be written as a function of change in displacement delta u. So if you remember our incremental form of the equation, it was this: m delta u dot dot plus c of t delta u dot plus k of t delta u equal to delta p of t. So which means that delta u is already here. If we put the delta u dot dot and delta u dot both as a function of delta u, then the only unknown which will remain in the equation will become delta u. This one, and this one. And we can solve this equation for delta u, and then we can put that delta u back in equation 10 and 11 to get the increments in velocity and acceleration also. So this was the reason why we have rearranged this equation 8 and 9 in the form of these equations 10 and 11. So now we can put this delta u dot dot in the governing equation of motion and delta u dot also in the governing equation of motion. So remember again that these equations 10 and 11 are derived from the linear acceleration assumption. So they are basically coming from equation 8 and 9, and equation 8 and 9 basically comes from the last slide where we have used this linear acceleration approximation. So this is basically equation 8, and this whole circle is basically equation 9. But we have changed one thing in these two equations, that we have replaced tau with delta t. So which means we are not talking about any instantaneous point between t and delta t, we are directly talking about this final point. So if we are given with the values at initial point, we should be able to get the values at this final point. So we have replaced tau with delta t in these two equations 8 and 9 to get these final equations 8 and 9, and then we have rearranged them into equations 10 and 11. So now the governing equation of motion was this: m into delta u dot dot, which is now equation 8, and then plus c of t into delta u dot, which is equation 9, plus k of t into delta u of t, which is same thing, is equal to delta p of t. So now the only unknown which remains in this equation, incremental form of the equation, is delta u of t, these three things. So you can take that common, and all the terms which were multiplied with this delta u of t, these terms can be called as k prime of t, and the constant values can be taken on the right hand side of the equation and combine with this delta p of t, and let's call them as delta p prime of t. So now with these changes, the incremental form of governing equation will be reduced to this equation 12, which is now a linear equation, an algebraic equation, where we have a constant multiplied with delta u of t is equal to another constant. So delta u of t now for any instant can be simply calculated by delta prime of t, p prime of t, divided by k prime of t, where k prime of t is this thing, which is all the multipliers of delta u. So see here, k of t, here you have k of t, then c of t multiplied by 3 over delta t, so here you have 3 over delta t into c of t, and here also m times 6 over delta t square, so here you have m times 6 over delta t square. And all the constant terms, which is this one or this one and also this one and this one, they all are shifted to right hand side of the equation, and all the right hand side is combinedly called as delta p prime of t, which is this long expression. So for any time instant t, if we have these values, for example the velocity, the acceleration, and delta t, mass, instantaneous value of the slope between fd and u dot, and the instantaneous value of slope between fs and u, if we have all these things, we can calculate delta u. This is our main unknown. So which means if we know all the values at time t instant, we can calculate delta u, and then we can use equation 10 and 11 to convert this delta u into delta u dot and delta u double dot, and we can add these increments to the previous values to get the values for next time instant t plus delta t. So that's how, if we apply these equations 10, 11 and 12, basically 12 will be applied first, and then the delta u will be put in these two equations to get the increments in velocity and acceleration also. So if we apply these equations step by step for all time instants in a series manner, we can solve the whole equation of motion for all time increments. So now this is the final form of our mathematical formulation. This is equation 12, which is simple algebraic equation, and the unknown is delta u, and we have k prime of t and delta p prime of t for any time instant t. If all the values at any time instant t is known, this equation will help us in going from t to t plus delta t. So we have this u of t, u dot of t, u double dot of t for any time instant t are known. We also have this k of t, c of t, m and delta p of t are also known. And then delta u of t can be determined. Delta u dot and delta u double dot can also be calculated from this delta u of t using equations 11 and 10. And then we can add them to the previous values. So this delta u can be added to u of t, this delta u dot can be added to u dot of t, and delta u double dot can be added to this u double dot of t to get the next values. And then these next values will use as the input to calculate the next increments, and then this process will continue until we solve it for all time increments. So in this formulation we have used two assumptions. One is the piecewise linear assumption that within t and t plus delta t, delta fd is equal to the instantaneous slope multiplied by the change in velocity, and delta fs is equal to the instantaneous slope of the fs and u relationship multiplied by delta u. And the second assumption is that within t and t plus delta t, the acceleration varies linearly. This assumption gives us equation 8 and 9, which we have converted to equation 10 and 11. And that 10 and 11 basically help us in solving the governing equation of motion to get equation 12, which is a simple linear equation of the form F is equal to ku. So this equation 12 has a very simple form, just like F is equal to ku, and u can be solved as F over k. These assumptions are justified only when delta t is sufficiently small. If delta t is not small, then these assumptions may introduce a significant error in the solution. So small delta t will result in small error. Although the error in each time step is small, the error can accumulate and become significant when the number of steps is large. So the small error in one time step will be added to the error in the next time step, and if there are a significant number of time steps, the error can also sometimes become significant. So this accumulation of error should be avoided by imposing the dynamic equilibrium equation at each time step. So there is a small trick which we can use to stop this accumulation of error in each time step, and that we will explain in next slide when we see the flow chart of this calculations. So let's say at any time instant t, we have this u of t and u dot of t. Let's say these are knowns at any time instant t. So we calculate the instantaneous slope at that time instant for fs and u relationship and for fd and u dot relationship. So this is the slope which is k of t, and this is the slope which is c of t. And obviously if we are solving a linear problem, in that case there is no need to calculate these slopes. K of t will be a constant number which will be given, and c of t will also be a constant number which will be given in linear case only. But if the structure is non-linear, then u will be given already with fs and u relationship and fd and u dot relationship. So using these two relationships, you can calculate slope at any time instant at any value. So let's say if you have this initial value of u of t as 0, let's say at time instant t the value was 0, which means we are talking about the initial slope, the starting slope. And similarly, if u dot of t is 0, which is the starting value to start the calculations, for example, we are talking about the initial slope fd. But as the values of this u of t and u dot of t will change when we cycle through these calculations, the instantaneous slope will also change. So these fs and fd relationships, which are functions of u and u dot respectively, will be given for a nonlinear structure. So for example, I can say, for example, my structure is a steel structure and fs and u relationship will exactly look like this, a elastoplastic or bilinear kind of a structure. So I already know that up to this point the k will be constant because it is linear, and after that point, because line is horizontal, so k is equal to 0. So I already know the value of slope, instantaneous slope, at all the points of this fs and u relationship. So the first step is to calculate this k of t and c of t slopes. And if these two relationships are given, f of d and u dot of t, this relationship for example, and the fs and u relationship, we can also calculate the values of fs and fd at any time instant also. For example, for any time t, if u of t and u dot of t are known, so we can calculate the values of fs and fd also from this relationship. So for example, if u dot of t is this value, this one, so you can get this f of d here corresponding to any u dot of t. So the second step is that you impose the dynamic equilibrium equation. This is the same equation 1, which is the governing equation of motion, but now u double dot of t is on left hand side, and that is part of the inertial force. So m times u double dot of t is equal to the other forces, the sum of other forces. So m can be taken here on the left hand side of the equation, and in the bracket you have p of t minus fd and minus fs. So this is the same equation 1 which is rearranged now to calculate u dot dot of t. So for any given u of t and u dot of t, the u double dot of t can be calculated using equilibrium equation. And this imposing the equilibrium equation will avoid the accumulation of error, as we will see in few minutes. So if u of t, u dot of t and u double dot of t for any time instant t are known, we can calculate this k prime and delta p prime. So k prime is equal to k of t plus 6 over delta t into m plus 3 over delta t into c of t. Similarly, for delta p prime we have this all expression, but all things are now known. So u dot of t and u double dot of t, these are also now known. So we can calculate this delta p prime here, and once these two values are calculated already, then we can divide them to get delta u, which is equation 12. And once the change in displacement is known, we can convert it into change in velocity using equation 11. We could have calculated the delta u dot dot here using equation 10, but instead of doing that, we have opted for this option, that this u dot dot will be calculated automatically for any time instant using the governing equation of motion instead of using the equation 10. And why we have decided this? Because we want to avoid the accumulation of error in each time step. So if we don't impose this equation 1, because this was not part of our original plan, and we already have an equation 10 which gives us the increment in delta u dot dot, and we can add this increment in acceleration with the starting value of acceleration to get the next value of acceleration. So we could have done this thing also, that we could have calculated u dot dot of t plus delta t, which is the next acceleration, equal to u dot dot of t plus the delta u dot dot of t determined from equation 10. But instead of doing that, we have opted for this option, that we will be calculating the acceleration in every calculation step using equation 1, using this imposing the dynamic equilibrium equation. So this equation will force the system to follow equilibrium at any time instant. Whenever this calculation will run for all time instants, the equilibrium will be satisfied using this equation 1, and the error will not be accumulated. So which means for any time instant, u dot dot will be coming from equation 1, from this step, but the u and u dot will be coming from these calculations. Delta u will be calculated using equation 12, and it will be converted to delta u dot using equation 11, and we will add these two increments to the starting values, these values from which we have started, and we will add them here to get the values of displacement and velocity at t plus delta t. And once t plus delta t values are known, we can use them as again an input to run another cycle of calculations to get the next values. So we will run these calculations in steps to solve for all values of u, u dot and u double dot. So I hope this flow chart is clear to you now. So we will start at time t, and we will get the values at t plus delta t, and then we will use these next values as an input to get a next set of values, and then these values will be used again. So this process will be continued until we have the values for all time increments. So the response of any single degree of freedom system with any prescribed nonlinear properties, which means the relationship between fs and u and the prescribed relationship between fd and u dot, this response can be evaluated using step-by-step integration. The response of any linear single degree of freedom system can also be evaluated using the same flow chart and the same mathematical formulation. All you need to do is that set k of t equal to a constant number k for all time instants and set c of t equal to a constant number c for all time instants. So if you automate this process, step-by-step integration for a nonlinear system, you can simply use it also for linear system by just putting constant k of t and a constant c of t. So in order to set delta t, you should consider the rate of variation of the applied loading. So if the applied loading is a highly fluctuating applied loading, this kind of thing, so delta t should be very small to capture all the important points of p of t. But if the applied loading is like this, so then you can have a big delta t also. So you have to be careful about this. And also, in order to determine this delta t, you should consider the nonlinearity of damping and stiffness properties also. So for example, if you have the Fs and U relationship like this, so you should be careful that your delta t is so small that you can capture this sudden change in the stiffness, and your solution should not jump from, let's say, this u to this u directly. So your delta t should be small, that you should capture this sudden change in the slope, which is this point, yield point. And you should also consider the natural period of the structure, because if the natural period of the structure is small, you should have a very small delta t, but if the natural period is long, then you can have a higher value of delta t also. So you should consider these three things in order to determine this delta t. Most of the times this delta t is already defined by the numerical definition of this p of t. So for example, if you are given with p of t as this thing, that at time t equal to 0, p of t is, let's say, 0, and t is equal to 0.01, the value of p of t is given, and 0.02, the value of p of t is given. So already the delta t is defined by this numerical definition of p of t. So your delta t will be simply equal to 0.01 second for this case. But you should consider the other two factors also in order to have your delta t adequate. So the choice of delta t also depends on the nonlinear properties, as I have said in last slide. So for example, if you have sudden changes of stiffness at certain points of the Fs and U relationship of a nonlinear system, then you should have a very small delta t to capture these changes in the stiffness. So a rule of thumb is that delta t over capital T, which is the time period of the structure, it should be less than 1 over 10. But my suggestion would be that if you put it less than 1 over 30, then you can capture the response more accurately. The step-by-step integration technique will be extended for the calculation of response of nonlinear multiple degree of freedom systems later. So in later part of this course, maybe if we have time, we can study the response of multiple degree of freedom systems using this step-by-step integration. So now we will see a numerical example. We will be given a single degree of freedom system, and this example is taken from Clough and Panzine book, the same as Duhamel integral. So we have now a single degree of freedom system with m, c and k given, and the applied loading p of t is also given, this one. So this p of t is basically numerically defined. So now you are given that at time t equal to 0, value of p is 0, but at time 0.1 second the value of p is 5, then next time increment it becomes 8, and then it reduces to 0 again. So you have these values, t equal to 0, p of t equal to 0, then t equal to 0.1 second, then p of t equal to 5 kips, then 8 kips on the next second, which is 0.2 second. So your delta t is already defined, which is 0.1 second. This is your delta t. And you have to solve this system both for linear case when the structure was linear, and when the structure is non-linear and following the elastoplastic kind of hysteretic behavior, that at u equal to 1.2 inches the system yields and whatever the k was, which was initial k, now the k become 0, and when it unloads, it follows the same k as the initial k. So this is the initial k and this is the unloading k, which is same as the initial k, and also it can yield in the other direction also, and the yield point is also given, which is the 6 kip. So the case 1 is solve it for elastic system where k is constant, which is 5 kip per inch. This is given here, 5 kip per inch. And then the second case is the elastoplastic case. Elastoplastic case, which will be this one, that it is following this behavior, the structure is following this behavior, and the relationship between Fd and u dot is linear forever. So this one, so Fd and u dot is linear with a constant slope, which is c, and that c is given also here, 0.2 kips per second per inch. So the c is also constant, but the relationship between Fs and u in this elastoplastic case is nonlinear, and that nonlinear relationship is given. That is a simple kind of nonlinear relationship in which the value of k remains the same, the initial value up to a certain displacement, and after that it becomes 0. So this is a simple case of elastoplastic nonlinear system. So we will solve that. Obviously, to implement that flow chart, you have to take help from maybe Excel or some programming language. So in the book you are given with this solution for elastoplastic system nonlinear response analysis, and it is in the form of table. For all values of t and p of t, the calculations are done, and the value of this delta u here, delta u and delta u dot is calculated for all time instants, and they are added to the previous values to get the next u and next u dot for the next time instants. So for example, for first time instant, this one, the value of u and u dot, the initial values were 0, 0, and we have calculated the delta u as 0.07 and value of delta u dot as 2.11. So you just added these values to 0, 0 to get the next values, which is 0.07 again and 2.11 again. So using an Excel sheet, I have solved this example using our flow chart, which is shown in the previous slides, and I will show you the solution and will give you that Excel sheet so that you can also see the solution and you can try it for different input values. So let's go to that Excel sheet. Here is that problem. First, for the linear systems. So now you are given with a single degree of freedom system, and this loading history is given, and now there is no relationship between Fs and u. The system is linear, which means that k will remain constant 5 kip per inch for all the time steps, and c will remain constant 0.2 kips second per inch for all time instants. So you can use this flow chart to automate the calculations for all time steps. So here your m, c and k are given, and your time t and p of t is also given. So the initial values which we will assume will be 0, 0 for displacement and velocity. So here you have, for example, here you have a 0 initial value for displacement and 0 initial value for velocity. So these values will be used to calculate Fs and Fd. Fs will be simply equal to Ku because we are doing the linear case, and Fd will be simply equal to Cu dot. So since u and u dot for this time step are 0, Fs and Fd are also 0. So Fi will be coming from the equation 1, which is the governing equation of motion. Fi is equal to P of t minus Fd minus Fs. Since all P of t, Fd and Fs are 0 for this time step, Fi will also be 0, and u double dot will be calculated in next step as Fi over m. Fi over m is equal to u double dot. So that also will be 0 for this case, for this first time increment. Now delta p, which will be the next value of p minus this value of p, will be equal to 5, and that delta p is required to calculate the delta p prime here. So delta p prime, if you maybe go up and see what is delta p prime, this is delta p prime, this whole thing. So you need to know delta p of t, and then all of these values, delta t, m, u dot for that instant, u double dot for that instant, c of t, u dot for that instant, delta t, u double dot for that instant. So all of these values are now known for this time instant. So you can calculate these values, which will finally make delta p here, delta p prime here. So delta p prime will be this value for this time instant, and it will keep on changing as we go to the next time instance. Now k here is the constant number, the initial stiffness, and k prime is this one. K prime will be equal to k of t plus all of this thing. So for linear case, k of t will be a constant thing, constant for linear case, and that will be equal to 5 kip per inch. So if you put this thing as constant, all the other two terms are also constant, because c of t is also constant here, 0.2 kip second per inch. So that is also constant. K prime of t will be constant for all time steps for a linear case. And since we have already calculated k prime, we can divide this delta p prime with k prime to get this delta u. So if you see the formula, for example, I show you here the formula. This is simply the division of delta p by k prime, and this delta p is calculated here. If I show you the formula, which is the sum of this plus this, because I have make a separate column for this term and a separate column for this term and then a separate column for delta p. So you sum all these three columns to get the delta p prime here as sum of three columns here. So once you already get this delta u for a particular time step, you can use this equation 11 to get the delta u dot. So all of these things are the calculations for this equation 11, and finally in this column you get the delta u dot, which is equation 11. So our main outputs which will be used in next time step is delta u here and delta u dot, which is here. So these two values 0.07 and 2.113, these two values will be used in the next time step. This will be added to the initial values of u and u dot to get the values for next time step. So the next time step u will be equal to 0.00, which is this initial value, plus delta u, which is 0.07. So if you see here, the formula is C42 plus O42, which is this 0 value plus delta u. So all you need to do is that you can just simply solve for one time step and just drag the calculations in Excel for all time steps. So you can get the displacement and velocity, this one and this one, and the acceleration, this column, this whole column, for all time steps, and then you can plot any response. So here I have plotted the displacement. Here you can see the displacement is plotted for 10 or 11 time steps, which is from 0 to 1 second. So it is from 0 to 1 second. These are the values of displacement, but these are the values for linear system. Let's quickly change the solution to nonlinear system, and that is this next sheet, which is the elastoplastic system. Now we are given with a relationship between Fs and u, which is an elastoplastic in nature. So we will use the same calculations, but now this k of t, which was initially taken as constants, this k of t, this will not remain constant. So this k of t is not constant for this case. This is the only change we have to do in our calculations, and then we will be able to get the response for this non-linear elastoplastic system. So let's see that change. Let's go down to the calculations, the same table, but now here we know already that Fs is equal to Ku for last case, but now it is not equal to Ku. It will be coming from the function. It will be coming from this kind of function, which is bilinear Fs and U. So now the K value will remain equal to 5 kip per inch, but not for whole solution, but up to the point where displacement is less than 1.2 inches. So we start solving the same time steps, but every time we check what is the displacement. So in this time step, which is the fourth time step, the value increase from 1.2 inches. So this is beyond the yield displacement which was given to us. So if I go up, I can see the yield displacement here. Yield displacement is 1.2 inches. Here you can see the yield displacement. This is 1.2 inches. So in the time step where the displacement increase from 1.2 inches, K becomes 0. The line becomes horizontal, flat, which means K is equal to 0. So for all those time steps in which U is greater than 1.2 inches, we have to put K equal to 0. And the corresponding value of Fs will be constant, and that constant is equal to 6 kips. So for all those time steps, I repeat again, which will have displacements more than 1.2 inches, which means that you are in the yield range, K will be 0 and Fs will remain constant, which is equal to this number, and that number is 6 kip. Fs will not be calculated by multiplying K with U. Fs will remain constant for those time increments. So we will see all those time increments in which U is greater than 1.2 second. Starting from this time step, we put Fs equal to 6 constant and K equal to 0, and all the calculations will remain same. Similarly, delta U for this time increment came out to be positive number here, positive number, which means that in this Fs and U relationship, after yielding, we are going ahead. We are going to the next time increment here. So the next time increment, we will have another new U value, and then again K will remain 0 and Fs will remain 6, and the delta U come out to be again positive, which means after yielding we are again going to the next point in the loading phase. So if I write here clearly that we yielded, and after yielding we are going next step and next step like this. So delta U is positive again, and we go to the next step, which is adding delta U to the previous U and starting the next value. In this time step also, since we are in the yield range, the Fs will remain equal to 6 and the K will be 0. Delta U is again positive. So now we go to the next step here, and we add this delta U to the previous value to get next delta U. Again Fs will be 6 and K will be 0. But this time step, just note that this delta U is minus, which means that we came back and we are at the unloading phase. Let's say if we were here in previous step, now we are on unloading phase and we went back basically in U. So this means that since we are following unloading case, which means that we are reversed in direction, and in the reverse direction the K value is the same as the initial K value. So this is the K value, same as this K. So this was the behavior of elastoplastic system, that if we unload it or load it in the other direction, which means that the next U is less than the previous U, which means we are going down, the structure will follow the same initial stiffness, the same slope K, which is the initial slope. So that's why we have put here K equal to 5 for this case. Here K is equal to 5, which is the initial value, and next delta U is also negative, which means K is again 5. Next is again negative, so K is equal to 5. So all the delta U are negative, so K will remain 5. So the value of Fs is calculated as follows. You can see the formula here. What I have done here is that I have subtracted the plastic displacement, which is the peak displacement minus the yield displacement, and this is the plastic displacement. I have subtracted it from the total displacement calculated in that time step, and then I multiplied it with the stiffness, which is 5. So I have to do it for all those time steps in which there is unloading or loading in the other direction. So you can see that I have subtracted the peak displacement, which is 2.687, which was achieved here, and I have subtracted 1.2 from this, which is the yield displacement. So the difference will be basically equal to this plastic displacement, and that displacement is the post yield displacement, basically this one. So this displacement should be subtracted from the total displacement, and then whatever we get, that displacement should be multiplied with the K value, which is the 5 kips per inch, and that's how we should get the Fs value for all those time steps in which the displacement is going in the opposite direction. So with these two changes, all the other calculations will be same and the graph will be slightly different, and now this will become the inelastic displacement. So this is the inelastic displacement which your elastoplastic structure will follow, and this is significantly different from the elastic displacement. So I have plotted a comparison plot here. You can see the difference between elastic and elastoplastic displacements. This line, top line, is the elastoplastic line. So this is elastoplastic, and the green line is the elastic displacement. Black line is the static displacement, which means I just divide the value of P at every time instant by the value of K, which is 5 kip per inch, to get the static displacement, which means that this is the displacement which your structure would be having if this P of T will be a series of static forces with these values. So this is the static displacement, this black line, added here for comparison purpose. For elastic system, the structure will have this green line. For elastoplastic system, the structure will have this red line. So you can see that there is a significant difference in displacements of both the systems. Elastoplastic system will have more displacement because it yields, so it will have more displacement, peak displacement, compared to the elastic displacement, which is green line. So that's all about this example, and you can also see this solution here in the Clough and Panzine book, and you can play with this Excel sheet and you can check the response. So here it is shown that the yielding phase starts after a displacement of 1.2 seconds, which will be somewhere at this point here, and after this point the difference between these two lines can be seen. Before this point there will be no difference. So here also in our solution you can see that before 1.2 displacement, which is somewhere here, so before that both of the structures are exactly having the same behavior, but after yielding both structures will have different displacement. The elastic displacement will not yield and it will follow this green line, but the elastoplastic structure will yield and will follow this red line. So that's all about this lecture, and we will continue with the next topic, which is the response spectrum analysis for single degree of freedom system, and I will introduce you with the concept of elastic response spectrum in the next video. Now with these two methods, Duhamel integral and step-by-step integration method, you are expected to handle any general dynamic loading, and you should be able to calculate the response of any single degree of freedom system against such kind of general dynamic loading. So that's all about this session, and I will see you in the next class, which will be about response spectrum analysis. Thank you and see you in the next class.